Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast, where purpose driven entrepreneurs turn self sabotage into self compassion and rise into their power. I'm your host, Lauren Perlingi, and I'm here to share real conversations, tools to help you create a business and life aligned with your soul. So let's dive in. In today's episode, I have Lara. She is an intuitive guide. Welcome, Lara. I'm so happy to have you here with us this
Thanks for
morning.
having me, Lauren.
Of course. So we're just going to jump right in. I want to hear about who you are, your story, and how you help people.
So I have been on a deep healing journey for the last 6 years. But I guess I left private sector corporate career and dove into a healing journey right off the bat, and then have sort of morphed my business over the years, always sort of recalibrating into alignment. And I've gone from career coaching and guiding people really with their job search to now helping women and specifically mothers really unravel their generational patterning and their trauma so that they can show up in more of an alignment, if they're a mother, to parent from truth and not trauma, and really find alignment, whatever that means for them.
Yeah, and I love that because there's a lot of dads that listen to this too, but a lot of mothers and especially like single mothers too, that have had trauma. So kind of like where in your story, or like how do you, like, where does that show up for you? Like when you say parenting from truth, what does that look like? Like what does that mean?
So I realized in my daughter has truly been my biggest catalyst in my healing journey. And when I say my healing journey is, a lot of times, yes, we need to be self-led and have that motivation to sort of find the life that we want to live. But when you have someone literally who is a exact mirror of you and a reflection of you, it drives you a little bit harder to get your stuff together and move forward. And so really, I had a lot of, we all can perceive a situation as traumatic, right? Like that's in the individual. And I experienced a lot of trauma as a child and in my adult life. Well, it's been a trend for me. And really, I realized that my reactions and my nervous system were completely dysregulated. And when I started peeling back the layers of, what I want to say, quote unquote, all my neurodivergent, labels and, all the nervous system regulation stuff, when I start peeling back the layers of like why I react the way I react, why I show up the way I show up, it all stemmed from my childhood and either wanting to do something so far different on the spectrum or caught in the middle. And, we have all the intentions to not be our parents, but when we are in the moment, that is how we react. And I realized I was projecting so much onto my daughter, and I needed to, if her nervous system was out, it's because I can't regulate my own nervous system. Like we lead the way, we lead the way by living the way. And I realized that so much of my own healing had to happen so I could show up as a mom and I could be and I could lead, and I need to figure out how I need to regulate my own nervous system so I can guide her with hers, emotional reactions, raising my voice, yelling, you name it. Like you break down, how you make your child finish what they're eating or not what they're eating, how you take things personally or not take things personally. You know what I mean? Like how you react, how you don't stay calm, how all those things when you have a child, an innocent child, reflecting back either that they could be scared of you or when you emotionally hurt your child. I also from that I learned I had no idea what it meant to love with no conditions. Like I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so, even my own child, I put conditions on love, right? Like if they don't behave a certain way, you close off and you're not open armed. Like, so everything, like it was just like one thing after the next. Like it was like rapid coaching on speed, just because it was just like, right, it was like one thing after the next. I was just like, I'm gonna keep on screwing up my daughter over and over and over again. And, I can't change what happens in her father's household, but I can damn well change and control what happens in mine and neutralize all that stuff for her so she doesn't spend her entire life carrying the same generational insanities that I've been carrying. So that's what I mean by parenting from truth and not trauma. It's finding your own wholeness, your own truth, and then leading by that and not the trauma that you've, been programmed with your entire life.
Wow, that's very powerful. This what you were saying. I'm like, I can resonate, and I feel like so many other people right now can resonate with this without realizing. When you're talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's literally what I've done without. I mean, now I realize I've done it, but like when I was going through all of the motions, especially when you said, we all don't want to be our parents. And for me, in my perspective, I realized I didn't want to be my parents so bad that I became them,
Mhm.
especially in situations when I would yell and then my daughter would look at me and start crying. And then and then I would see, like we're intuitive. So it's like I see myself in her of when I was yelled at, when I had big emotions and didn't know you know, what was happening, or like I just wanted something and I would get yelled at and be told to go to my room and I would have to deal with all that by myself, which then started with anger. And it's like I'm starting to know that I have a lot of resentment, not now, but I did through my journey of like, it still comes up here and there of like my mom yelling at me and then, watching my mom with my daughter. It's completely different. Same thing with my dad. It's completely different. So like jealousy started coming up. Like, why couldn't you treat me that way when I was a kid? I don't want them to treat my daughter like that. So it was like actually seeing it from like an observer perspective. Same thing too. Like I wish I could control or actually get her bio dad to figure out his own healing. So so he could stop projecting that, you know, like you said, neutralizing every single time she sees him. I have to neutralize it. It's like back and forth. And it's just like sometimes I'm like, dude, I don't understand. Like just
Yeah.
either move over or go on. Like that's literally how I say it. But I'm like, you know what? He has a role here and that's his role and I'm going to accept it. And I feel like a lot of parents can, you know, male or female, whoever you are, dad or mom, there's moms that are like this too. There's dads that are like this, that it's like once you just accept the fact that you're only in control of you and obviously control of your kid too, I feel like, is that the moment, would you say that's what it shifted for you during your journey?
I mean, I have a cousin that we've been intertwined with, and she is a guardian of children, and so it took someone calling me out on my own stuff for me to realize, like, when you're in your own trauma, you don't like, I think the biggest shift in my healing was actually becoming self-aware. I had no self-awareness. Like I truly had no self-awareness. So I didn't realize how mean I was or how harsh I was, or how I didn't recognize when she was like completely when she completely shut off. Like I truly had no self-awareness. And when I started then recycling back what was transpiring, then it was like permission to like call me out on like, well, like
Correct.
she's a reflection of you. So what actually was going on for you? And
Yeah.
so my biggest shift in my parenting was becoming self-aware. And, I say I work with mothers, I work with fathers too, but there's just something so deep from my own healing journey when it comes to the things that I've had to deal with more on the female feminine side of things,
Yeah.
that it's more of a love project for me to guide moms. You know what I mean? Like I can guide dads all day long, but there's something too with a masculine leading a masculine and a feminine leading the feminine. Like it's always cringy to watch men talk about how mothers and women need to show up and vice versa. Like it's like,
Right.
well, like, I get it, you could do it, but
Right.
let me tell you from my own, like how I even do relationships to lovers to climbing corporate ladders. Like it's very different when you're speaking to someone who's lived, eaten, breathed the same gender roles that entire lifetime. You know what I mean? But yeah,
Right.
so but self-awareness was like my biggest, like, oh damn, like I had no self-awareness whatsoever. Like
Yeah.
I was so narcissistic in my programming. I truly had no self-awareness.
Yeah. And thank you for being vulnerable and saying that, because I feel like that just to get to that point is hard. I know it was hard for me when like my mom can be very narcissistic, and my dad's kind of like the empath, the unemotional, like, that's the attraction in there, so when I look back at my relationships, I realize I have a lot of traits like my mom. So I needed to change that, because I'm just going to then repeat this generational thing of my mom, right? Like, and that's who I was attracting as a partner, somebody else that was very narcissistic. I mean, I'm, at heart, I'm an empath. Like, it's like I morph into the person that I'm with. And it's just like, what's happening? And that's kind of where I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, my daughter, she was very young when this happened. So thank God I didn't. I mean, I probably created some trauma for her, but it's not enough, like, it's not a lot. I feel like, I started my healing journey when she was very young. So it's like, even now, still the programming comes up. I feel like it's going to be a journey. It's a journey for all of us. Like it always, there's stuff that comes up that I do yell sometimes, but I always make sure I apologize, because I mean, she doesn't deserve to get yelled at because I can't control my frustration, or like my overwhelm or whatever, or if she's testing my boundaries. So yeah, I am very similar to your experience too, because I didn't I it took one of my first mentors to say to me, Lauren, you need to accept. I would blame everybody else. Everybody, it was my mom's fault. It was my trauma. It was my partner's abusive. It was everybody else's fault but my own. And she said, but what did you do in this situation? And I was like, nothing. I didn't do anything. I didn't, I'm probably said at one point that I'm perfect, right? And then I realized I was alone by myself, isolated. And then I'm looking around, literally, I remember this. I don't have anybody to blame. I need to start blaming myself. And then that shifted, that I can look at it from, even when I say, I wish this, I wish that. And it's just like, maybe they're just not aware. I don't really think that people that are self-aware, and most of society is very unaware, then I'm like, I can have compassion for them. I can have boundaries, here and there. And it's like, oh, this is how I operate. Because it's like, when somebody calls me out now, then I don't take offense to it, because I'm like, oh, I am like that. Okay, let me do better, whatever. So it's like I call myself out so much that I feel like that, and I'm sure you too, that you're very self-aware now, that you know what you're doing. And if you're not going to intentionally do something bad. So I want to just say that that is very vulnerable of you to realize that moment that shifted.
And I love what you said in regards to mentor, as I had someone close as well too, because a shadow is a shadow for that reason. It's behind you. You
Right.
can't see it. And
Yeah.
and that's why, coaching and guiding and why the work that, I do is so important is because you need somebody to witness you. And someone can only witness you if they've come to that awareness themselves. And so it's so important to have individuals in your circle or work with different healers or guides or different practitioners to help you become self-aware, because truly when we're in it, you don't see it, and it is behind you. It's a shadow for a reason, right? And so there's so you can go so far on your own healing journey, and you can do the reflective stuff, and you can do as much as you can, but at some point you need to get to a point of being open to actually being witnessed. And that's such a powerful gift when you get that experience, for someone to actually say, hey, have you looked at this? Like, hey, what's being uncovered, because that's the only way that we can move forward.
Right. And that's when I used to always say, well, my shadows have, the biggest wisdom for me. It's literally what's teaching me. So it's like before I used to be scared of them. Now I'm just like, oh yay. Like, it's like I can move past this. It's like I don't have to carry this around. I
Yeah.
wasn't always like that. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. So you spoke about breaking generational patterns. What did that process reveal for your own conditioning, and how did that really help you in motherhood, becoming like a mirror to that healing?
Well, I mean, like, it's very liberating to understand, like, when you're healing your father wound and your mother wound, because, regardless if you have any wounds, it's because your mother attracted your father and they are mirrors of each other's trauma, right? So it's just they're the opposite. So it's like there's not like one parent or the other parent. Even if you had one good relationship with one parent, the other one either didn't defend or didn't stand up, or to allow the other parent to do that. So if you have any, I guess, trauma from your parents, which most of us do, it's from both sides, not just one side. And so it's like in my generational unraveling, because I was working with, so my cousin was on this journey with me. She's 69, so she's my mom's, first cousin. And when we were going through the process of it all, she could also see my patterning based on how, because she was raised by a female. And so it's like she could see how the generations, because I'd be the younger generation, and then my daughter would be so we have three generations that we could see the lineage of generational patterning. And, even in my healing journey of the mother wound, it's very, there's not as much resentment, and there's a little bit more compassion when you understand your parents are just outcome of their parenting. And so you can start going through the lineage of, right, like, cellularly, it's studies have shown that we hold on to 7 generations of cellular memory. So 7 generations of cellular memory. Many of us weren't on the continent that we are on. Most of us went through war. Most of us went through famine. Most of us went through huge cellularly tragic moments. And so when you can see how that carries through the generation, and that all the women, your aunts, your grandparents, that they all carry the same trauma. It's very the more that we know about ourselves, the more grounded and more strong we are in our inner knowing and inner standing of ourselves, and why we are the way that we are. And so when you can do that and you can say, right, okay, she's a product, like, my mother's a product of her mother, and her mother went through this, so that's why she has those mentalities. And you start breaking them down, so it's not as much of a victim villains scenario, and you can sort of more see like the lineage of the insanity and how many generations that's carried on for. Because it's like you're the first generation to experience this, right? Now you're the first generation to maybe be this extreme in different areas, but I mean, you're not the first, right? So and it builds over time. What was maybe easier to deal with became almost impossible to deal with. It's like, you know, programming, body shape, dieting, like, you name it, it happens generationally. Like it's not, it's not been a new concept in how we show up in relationship, how we hold ourselves confidently, what we value and not value. Like, you know what I mean? All those things, those are passed on through the generations. Like you are a product of your lineage. Like, you know, as much as you want to resist it or not, like there'll be threads that pull through that you're like, oh, right. Like I can see how, yeah, my great great grandmother, this is what she experienced. And then you can look at both sides of, both sides, both the father side and the mother side. And you're like, okay, right. Like that's truly how it sort of has domino effect down to me. So it really helps you understand why you are the way that you are. And then it allows you to not hold so much, I guess, anger or weight onto one person, because, you know, they don't know what they don't know, right? Like
Right.
it wasn't intentional. Like, yes, they could have made different decisions, but hey, like we're all human. So it's like, it's like, right, this is why that they are the way that they are. They weren't just created like this. Like this is so much bigger than they even realize. So it allows you to have a broader perspective, a shift in perspective, and like it gives you a whole new awareness to your entire life, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. I feel like that's specifically when I even now through going through that generational like trauma breaking pretty much, I noticed that my mom, because of my healing, my mom is easier to deal with sometimes. Same thing with my dad. It has shifted my dad too. And I feel like I've looked at it, even my daughter, like how she like watches me interact with my mom or my dad. Because like you said, I've got trauma from both sides. Same thing with what my daughter will do. She's going to get stuff from her dad, her biological dad. She also has a stepdad that stepped up and, is supporting her emotionally, mentally, financially. Like she relies so heavily on him emotionally because she doesn't have that from her dad. So like, I always think to myself, God, she's lucky because, she's doesn't, it could just be that she has me and she has him and that's it. And then, her other support systems, but we're both lucky that I'm in a healthy relationship. And I mean, I say this all the time because then she also has that, oh, this is what healthy looks like, versus this is what I'm going to attract when I get older kind of thing. And that was like my biggest thing. I wanted to heal for my daughter in the beginning and realized, no, I need to heal for myself. Like she was my reminder in the
100%.
beginning. Yeah.
And
And I,
I relate to that a million percent. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like that was one of my driving forces to leave my own marriage. So like it
right.
is,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not how she's going to internalize what a healthy relationship looks like. And and I have to lead the way, but I had to find my way first.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That was ultimately the beginning, the reason why I filed for divorce for the first time. Like, there's multiple times that I was manipulated back to stay. And to the point that it was like the last physical abuse that when she was like 3 months old, almost being pushed down the stairs, I was like, I'm not doing this. And then I like, he left and, left her life thinking, oh, great. So he's out of her life for a couple years. And then he came back and I was like, great. But I was I was on my healing journey at that point. And I've healed a lot of things that I was stronger to deal with and know what to do when things happen versus completely like broken down, like not knowing where to go in the beginning. So it's like, and then eventually I had to figure out how to be in a healthy relationship with myself and then in another healthy relationship. So it was like, I say this to people all the time. People are like, oh, it's so much easier to, I just wish I could be in a healthy relationship. And I'm like, after all of that, you can revert back so easily to an unhealthy relationship. It's actually harder to be in a healthy relationship because you can't just get away with things like that. You just can't. It's just, I mean, in my experience, you can't. You can't go back to how you used to be. So
No, not at
so
all.
speaking about, I was gonna say, speaking about healing and it not being linear, and what resilience looks like, or what it doesn't look like, or maybe it looks like grace. What kind of things do you help your clients and you help yourself with, like staying grounded when things feel messy or uncertain even now?
So a lot of things is nervous system work. So it's getting your nervous system in check, and whether that is through actual different somatic practices or whether that is through supplements or different technologies that, I work with all the time, like definitely you need to have your nervous system in check so you can actually receive what I'm going to tell you. Like, right? Like, if someone is in fight or flight, they will just shut down right away and they will not be open and receptive to the truth. And so, that's like a big chunk to where I stay. First, it's sort of touching base on that self-awareness. And then we jump into some nervous system work. You know what I mean? Like let's just rip off the band-aids, like where are we lying to ourselves? What's really going on? What is that for you? And then nervous system work. And then it's actually then implementing and then, working through the different life events that naturally and organically unfurl so you can actually put things into place. You're like, yeah, you could do all the healing work you want, and then all of a sudden you're in a relationship, and then it's going to bring up all your wounds all over again. And then you're given, the opportunity to navigate them with a different lens. But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, healthy relationships would trigger because you don't even know what it is to have a healthy relationship with anyone, like friends, family, you know what I mean? Like, we're not just talking partnership. Like, if you don't have a healthy relationship as with a romantic partner, most likely you didn't have healthy relationships with your friends either, or they would have never let you in that situation in the first place. So, when you realize how you show up in relationship with everyone, friends, family, and lovers. Like it's a big undertaking having those blinders ripped off and having this new awareness and how you navigate forward. But nervous system work is a huge one to get like grounded so you can actually receive and do the things like to keep you. Because when we go into fight or flight, we black out. We either don't realize what we're doing, we don't have control in the moment. And so learning different mechanisms to calm your nervous system, not just unwiring and rewiring why you have nervous system regulation in the first place. I mean, that's a journey on its own. But to have that awareness and just take control of working on regulating your nervous system and calming your body down so that you can actually breathe, lead, not disassociate, not numb, and stay present. You need to do all of that. And so yeah, that's generally what we do. So figure out ways to ground you back in.
Yeah. I really, that was, speaking about relationships. That was me. I'm like, where did all my friends go? Like, my friends that were my friends. And going through this journey, they weren't there. And it's like, oh, you're right. They were unhealthy for me too, because I would say things and they would be a mirror to who I used to be. And it's like, I don't resonate with that anymore, and not that I'm judging them, but I'm just moving this way. They're moving that way, like that's it. And I didn't really understand all of that until, now I have healthy friends, and I will say something and they'll always say, well, why don't you look at it from what's going on inside of you? And I'm like, damn, the hell. But they're telling me to look at myself. What's triggering me within myself? It has not, I mean, it could have something to do with the other person, but maybe it's always from like inside out now. And that's kind of like how I look at it. If somebody triggers me, what's going on inside of me that they're triggering me? Same thing in my relationship. It's like,
And the wild thing is, we weren't good friends either, right? Like, they weren't there for us. And
yeah,
truthfully, you're right. I didn't know how to be in relationship. I didn't, I had so many expectations on friendships that were so unrealistic, right? So it's like, truthfully, it's not just that, yeah, when you got divorced, it was like, hey, no one helped me pack my bags, no one helped me do this. And there was a lot of people, I was on such a, empowered, like, I'm going to do this. And so when other people were also going through their own stuff, I couldn't listen to them try to stay and figure it out. It's just like, no, I'm so motivated to move forward. I can't, you do you, I'll do me. But yeah, I wasn't genuine, not
Right.
even genuine, because I didn't even know that I wasn't. Like, but really, I didn't know how to be in any relationship, let alone my marriage.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
the truth of it. It's like, right, okay. Like there's a lot of layers to all the relationships of, okay, right, I was performing in all those relationships. I wasn't like authentically
That's
myself
it. I was going to
100% of the
say,
time.
I literally felt like I was a performer. And
Yeah.
I have to say, there will be one of my friends that will probably listen to this podcast. She is the only person that I still have in my life from my old life. And it's because she never judged me and just supported me. But I was a shitty friend to her. Like, she's probably given me a lot of compassion, a lot of forgiveness. And like, I've came to the awareness of how shitty I was. And we've talked about this plenty of times, but she honestly is probably the only person. And first, the universe gave me her, and there was a reason why she was in my life, and there was a reason why she also gave boundaries. She wouldn't answer me sometimes, or like I was going through my thing, she would check in, but that's it. She wouldn't ever take on what I was going through, but I always knew that she was there. Like, I always knew that if I really needed to talk to somebody, or like the dark parts of my dark night of the soul, I feel like I go through all the time.
Yeah.
I will say, and I won't trauma dump on her. Like, she'll say, how are you? Before, I would literally just, it was so bad. She's probably gonna laugh when she's listening to this, but um, like now it's like, people say this to me all the time. They're like, I don't want to trauma dump. And I'm like, I know how to be empathetic, and I also know how to be compassionate, and you're not going to trauma dump, but I know what you're talking about because I used to do the same thing. So yeah, like knowing that. And I mean, I feel like it was just a lot of forgiveness for myself, like, I don't, same thing with you too. Like, we're not, I don't think we're consciously aware of what we're doing when we're doing it. And then when you see it, you're like,
No.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody listening to that, if you're going through that, then give yourself a lot of compassion, because you
Yeah,
don't
give yourself a
know.
little bit more grace as you're, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
it's a deep inner standing and inner knowing. It's like, no, 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 like, right, this is I'm like this because I'm wounded, or I'm like this because, you know what I mean? I've experienced this, and then you get to co-create the reality that you want.
Right. Yes. Yes. That's a good reminder. So for women who maybe feel like disconnected or numb right now, what does like falling in love with yourself actually look like in your daily life, or how you help your clients?
Ooh. Uh, I mean, like that, the self-worth journey is a big one, because I mean, like, I realized that I had no self-worth, self-love, and self-value, and I truly masked that my entire life. So like simple things is like, I used to just like take my shoes off at the door, and sometimes the back entryway would be like a shoe mess. And then I was brought to the intention, like, okay, Lara, like, if you had to leave your house in emergency, you're a single mom, and if you trip over those shoes and hit your head on your garage door and take yourself out, you've just screwed your family unit. And so it was like little acts of self-care that I never would associate putting shoes away of being in self-care. But like I was so reckless with myself, not having enough gas in my tank, not putting away the shoes,
Yeah.
not making sure that I'm eating 3 times a day. That's just like the physical activities, and then you're just like, okay, well, myself and my value. I used to need so much external validation because I had no internal confidence in knowing that everything was external. We're not even going to talk about like romantic partnerships and, what I thought of, when it came to like actual physical intimacy. I was just like, I equated physical intimacy with that there was a connection, or that there was like, when it never was. Like that's such a, my awareness of the man brain, the female brain, I was driving totally in my wounded feminine, in my masculine, because that's what I've been conditioned to do, to control. I had no idea I was doing that because I didn't feel safe. Like, like when it comes to like the awareness that I've expanded to, it's just like, even from physical intimacy, like like I've gone on a celibacy journey, but not in the sense of doing that intentionally, but more so of I'm never going to potentially risk conceiving another child with anyone when I'm not loved the way I want to be loved, and I'm not safe, and I'm not in a relationship. And so, I've gone to being promiscuous or having lots of different partners to literally, 15 years of stagnant, besides my marriage. And it's just like, and once again, it's just such a shift in my awareness and seeking external validation and not needing that, and being in my own company and loving that and not being codependent. Like, you break down the self-love, journey. It literally started one moment at a time. It was just like, dancing with yourself with, naked in your bedroom mirror. Like, when it comes to the self-love journey, I mean, it's been a journey, a roller coaster.
Right.
But I mean, there's so many different layers depending on where you are in your life, in your insecurities, in your, in your shadows. And so many people are different, are at different awarenesses and different levels. So yeah, it's all different. But I mean, truly, when you break down, you're like, whoa, right, I truly do not give myself, or I've never, given myself true self-worth, self-value, and self-love. It's quite shocking when you have been this very confident person, successful person, what society deems as successful. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's very wild to sort of like strip down it and realize that because it was all performance, there was no self-love, self-worth, and self-value. It was constantly performing to please or appease someone else, or to be accepted by someone else, or to be chosen, to be loved, not to be abandoned. Like, when you actually like break down all those things, the self-judgment, the self-shame, like, you name it. Like, let's take a scroll out and talk about like the wild journey it was back to self. Like that, it's been a ride.
Yeah. And just by you saying all of that, here's my checklist. I'm like, yep, yep, yep. It's like, it's the same thing. It's just like, I would go through like, self-sabotage, or it's like, like self-worth or self-esteem, or it all has to do. And I said this to a client the other day. She was like, well, it's all to do with ourself. And I said, yeah, why do you think self is before the word? It has to do. So that's kind of like how I was kind of like helping her realize that if you're going to project it to be something else, somebody else is doing this to you, you're doing it to yourself first, which is attracting that person to you. Like, and that took me a very long time to learn, especially when I through my blame thing of like, no, it's everybody else's fault. And it's just like, now I can ask myself, I'll take responsibility for this part, because I only can take responsibility for the one side, like the one side too. And what the other person, that you don't got to worry about the other person. So I think that that's really powerful when you say, especially intimacy, which I am just kind of learning about this past year, especially in this, in my marriage now, that it tons of stuff are coming up, and I'm like, here we go, let's go, like, here we go. But I didn't realize that you just said it too about the intimacy, how wounded I was in that through
Well,
all of
both emotional intimacy and vulnerability, and physical intimacy, right? Like, intimacy is so, I mean, it's such a big umbrella. But yeah, like, I was never even vulnerable. You know what I mean? Like, I was always so worried of being abandoned that there was no, there was no sharing of what was actually going on for me.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't realize that I could do the the emotional piece, like I was able to speak about it, but the physical piece is, again, like you said, it's a big umbrella. I didn't realize, oh shit, this is actually this is a part of probably my wounding too, of the physical piece, because I just would shut down. I'm like, I don't feel like doing that, shut down. And then I started to notice like I was disconnected and numb. And that's obviously one of the wounds coming up. So it's fun to be in a healthy relationship, but it's also a lot of work at the
Well,
end.
I mean, the beautiful thing is when you're in that healthy relationship, you're safe to explore all those different things. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
it was such a wild concept when I was talking to when I was talking to someone and they were just like, "Oh, well, like I've never been physically intimate ever thinking about the other partner's enjoyment of it." And I was like,
Yeah.
I like and once again, because that's performing, I've only known physical
Right.
intimacy as performance. I've never been physically intimate without ever thinking in the act, what would they enjoy or not enjoy? The
Right.
second I put it outside of me, I'm performing. And so even so it's like, yeah, like everything I've done has been to please, lead to more likes, like you name it. Like it was never when you break it down, you're like, would you actually do all those things just for your own sheer enjoyment and not even think about theirs? I was just like, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever done that before, just for my own enjoyment of it without even thinking, will they enjoy it? So that's why I'm going to do it. Like, it was just such a head, like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, right. Like, I can't say I have. And so it's just like, like, yes, okay, sometimes you're caught up in the moment and you're just doing things, but like, you know what I mean? Like most of the time, at some point, there was still that knowing,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like knowing. So yeah, it's truly wild when you like break it down and you're like, oh my God, like, no, I've never done any of that solely for my own pleasure and enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah. I, with this conversation, my husband, like we had this conversation and he goes, well, you're safe. And it's constantly like, I can be on my own. Like it's constantly him reminding me of like, you can be on your own journey. I can be on my own journey and it's okay. And it's like that moment that he just says, it's okay. It's like, oh, I have to remind myself. And he's reminding me that it's okay and I'm like safe. And I feel like it's just sometimes conditioning of like when I get the spiral sometimes of like, that. But yeah, it's simply of him like understanding. Like, it just takes some understanding, I feel like, of for him from him, that he's like he knows that it's just me probably stuck in
And
this.
what a beautiful relationship that is. And that's truly, when you know it's such a gift
Right.
to be with someone who has that awareness, who doesn't take that on. And that's exactly what the masculine should do. They should calm your nervous system. They should just ground you back in, sweetie, and like, yeah, you're
Right.
safe. And like, you know what I mean? Like that is their role while we're up in the 5D in our intuitiveness,
Yeah.
pulling
Yeah.
everything in. Like they're here to ground us in, to sort of like bring us
Yeah.
in, to calm us down, to know that we're safe, to remind us. And I mean, it's beautiful when they have that self-awareness that they can see
Right.
when you're glitching. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, literally,
yeah.
literally. He goes, "Okay, stop being delusional. Come back to earth." And I'm like, "Okay," but it's like, and it's fun, and he makes it like funny, but at the same time, I was going through my own whatever, and lately he is just very patient. That he actually teaches me I need to be more patient. So it's like I try to look at him as like a mirror of like, of course he has his own stuff that he's going through and like his own shit and his wounded masculine, his wounded feminine, all of that. But it just seems like I want to be more patient. And then I don't tell the universe that because I don't need any more lessons of not being patient. I learned that the hard way. But it's like it's very freeing to me that this is like all I ever wanted when I was a kid, of just to be loved. I want to feel love. I want to be loved. And it's like, that's ultimately what I'm living now. So as much as I want to complain about other things, or like say you don't do this or you don't take the trash out, it's like, it doesn't matter, like just stupid stuff of like,
Yeah.
you didn't take the trash out. You don't ever take the trash out. It's like, that stuff is stupid, like when it's like deeper on an emotional level, I feel like that's ultimately what I wanted to get to. So I wish it for everybody too. I feel like, and I feel like every little girl's desire is to be, I think whoever you are, you just want to be loved and feel loved, like ultimately that's our goal at the end of the day.
But the
So
wild thing is most of us get trapped in what that looks like, not what that feels like. And that's the journey, right? What does it feel like to be loved the way you want to be loved? Not what that actually ends up looking like in our 3D reality. So it's like getting back to, what does safe feel like? What does being adored feel like? What does being heard feel like? You know what I mean? So that you can recognize that and stop getting lost in the actual actions and the materialism of how that actually comes into fruition, if that makes sense.
yes, yeah, 100%. Because it took me, and I'm sure people, I started out when somebody asked me that same question, well, what does safe feel like? And I'm like, couldn't even tell you. I could not even tell you. I could tell you an experience of how I kept myself safe. And then that was like, oh, okay. Like, so, some people can't even tell you what safe feels like or what that feels like. And again, that's the journey of it. And I feel like it's going to constantly be a journey. I think that that's like really important for people to know. It's like, just because my reality looks different than somebody else's, or your reality looks different than somebody else's, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a journey, because it's a roller coaster for me anyway, so yeah, that definitely is like important too. So I could talk about this all day, but before before we wrap up, when you guide women to lead from like presence, not performance, what are some like feminine aligned leadership? Like, what does that look like, and what does it feel like living in your truth?
I mean, it's so light. Like it, like what what does it look like? What does it feel like? Like it's when we start just even intuitively like accepting what's going on, like, and once again, like, well, like let's talk about eating, like, you know what I mean, like when we have a specific cycle, when you can sort of say, right, I'm really craving cinnamon, or I'm really craving baked goods, okay, it's around this time of the month, or whatever the case is. When you can start even intuitively allowing yourself and embracing what your body physically is asking for, it's empowering, instead of like suppressing it and saying, no, it's not. It's like, no, if you need to rest, you need to rest, embrace it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, start actually living attuned to what you're saying. Because it's not just when I say presence over performance, the second it's like, okay, well, does that bring me joy? Or does that, does my face light up and say, yeah, I totally want to do this? Or am I cringing? You know what I mean? And sometimes, like, start asking yourself questions in the mirror and watching your face react. You know what I mean? Like, are you lying? Are you not? Like I always say, to take a pen and paper, pencil and paper is the best, and start writing it out, because it's so hard to write out a lie. We can voice note a lie, we can text a lie, you know what I mean? But when you actually have a physical pen and paper, or a pencil and paper, if you're scribing with your hand, you'll notice when you start lying to yourself. Like your writing looks sloppy, you can't really see it, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to actually physically write it if it's not a truth deep down cellularly. So
Yeah.
truly it's, you know, in your everyday moment, is it a should, could, would? If it's any of those, it's not aligned. You know what I mean? Like, I want this. You know what I mean? Great. I have to do this, I could do this, I should do this. Like you're once again like, no, you don't need to do any of that. Like what's your body actually calling you to do? Like if you get lost in what you think that you should be doing, you're out of alignment and you're into performance. You know what I mean? Like I want to do this, I get to do this, like, rewiring your perception and your excitement around taking action in your daily activities. But no, it's like it's very freeing to start actually throwing out everything that you know. And it could go as simple as like, let's just follow your eating patterns for a month and see where you go and how present you are with actually what you're consuming. Like what about, your sleep patterns? Like just actually being present in the moment and catching yourself in our stories that we've programmed ourselves to believe. It's quite powerful. So yeah, everyday moments, breaking it down, you'll realize that you're on someone else's narrative and someone else's programming instead of your own. So yeah, from food to work to relationship, you know what I mean? Like all of the above, when you do what aligns with you and what feels good for you, everything starts to change, and everything is very, it's almost like you cast a spotlight right on your life with things that you aren't actually in alignment with.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Where can people find you?
The easiest way is to connect with me through my website, so www.larabokovay.com, but also on any single social media platform, I'm there. Lara
Yeah.
Bokovay, one and
And I'll
only.
make yeah, I will make sure that all of her links are below. If you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to this, they'll be below in the description box. Well, thank you for joining us on today's episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with somebody that you feel that would gain knowledge from listening. Thank you so much for listening to Enlightened Misfits podcast. Join me inside of the Enlightened Misfits Sisterhood. It's our community for spiritual entrepreneurs rising into purpose. You can connect with me about that on Instagram, below the link below in the show notes as well. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next time.